Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to ancient Greece, but we're not visiting the philosophers in Athens or marveling at the Parthenon. No, we're heading to a place famous for its six-packs and stern expressions, Sparta. Forget the glorious battles and the slow-motion action sequences you've seen in movies. We're going to explore the one thing that truly defined a Spartan's life. From cradle to grave, they're absolutely, unequivocally, legendarily terrible food. This isn't just a story about a bad menu, it's a story about how a society used blandness, hunger, and a truly disgusting signature dish as tools to forge the most feared soldiers of the ancient world. Honestly, you probably find a week here more punishing than any boot camp. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know down in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first sensation isn't warmth or a soft blanket. It's the crisp, biting air of the Laconian highlands. You've just entered the world, and the world, it seems, is immediately testing you. There are no gentle coups, no flurry of celebratory activity. There is only a quiet, almost clinical assessment. You are a new product of Sparta, and before you can be officially accepted, you must pass quality control. Your father takes you, wrapped not in soft wool but in a simple, functional cloth. He doesn't carry you to a warm hearth, but on a solemn walk to a place the locals call the Lesche. It's a sort of public meeting hall, a place where the old men of your tribe, the elders of the Gerisii, gather to make decisions, and the first decision they make about any new citizen is you. You are presented to them. Imagine this from your perspective, a blur of weathered faces, long beards, and eyes that aren't looking at you with affection, but with scrutiny. One of them, a man whose hands are wrinkled and calloused from a lifetime of holding a spear, takes you. His grip is firm, impersonal. He turns you over, examining your tiny limbs, the shape of your back, the sturdiness of your frame. He is looking for any sign of weakness, any deformity or frailty that would render you a liability to the state. Sparta, you see, has no room for baggage. It is a finely tuned machine of war, and every single component must be perfect. There's a curious little legend, probably more of a tall tale than historical fact, that Spartan babies were given their first bath not in water, but in wine. The idea was that a weak or epileptic infant would convulse and perish in the undiluted alcohol, while a strong one would emerge tempered and tougher. It's a brutal thought, and it perfectly encapsulates the Spartan mindset. Life is a series of tests, and the first one begins seconds after birth. As the elder holds you up, a hush falls over the small group. Your fate hangs in the balance. Will you be deemed fit to live, to one day hold a shield for Sparta, or will you be discarded, left on the nearby slopes of Mount Tegetos, a practice we now call exposure? It's a chilling thought, but for the Spartans, it was a practical matter of resource management. Historians, of course, are still debating the precise nature of this event. Was it a formal, state-mandated inspection for every single newborn, as the historian Plutarch described its entries later, or was it a more private, family-level decision, with the elders merely offering their official sanction? The truth is, the exact process is shrouded in the mists of time. Stark image of a society so committed to its ideals of strength that it would scrutinize its own children at the moment of their birth. But for you, in this moment, the debate is irrelevant. All that matters is the verdict. The elder finishes his inspection. He feels the strength in your grip as your tiny hand clutches his finger. He hears the power in your lungs as you let out a cry of protest against the cold air. He gives a slow, deliberate nod. You have passed. You are handed back to your father. There's no smile, perhaps just a flicker of stern approval in his eyes. You are now officially a Spartan in training. You have earned your right to exist. More importantly, you have earned your right to a lifetime supply of Sparta's most infamous culinary creations. You're taken home, back to your mother, and as you take your first meal, her milk, warm and nourishing, you have no idea that this will be the most delicious and comforting thing you will taste for a very, very long time. The real gastronomic trial is yet to come. For a few fleeting years, life is relatively simple. Your world is the confines of your home, a sturdy but unadorned structure of wood and stone. Your mother is your primary caregiver, and while Spartan women are not known for coddling, there is a certain security in her presence. You drink your fill of milk, grow stronger, and learn to walk on the packed earth floors. But this period of grace is, like all things in Sparta, temporary and by design. The day comes when you are weaned. The warm, sweet comfort you've known is replaced by your first real taste of the Spartan state. It arrives in a plain clay bowl. You eye it with the natural curiosity of a child. It's a thick, grayish paste. There's no enticing smell, no vibrant color. It's just there. Your mother dips a wooden spoon into the gruel and brings it to your lips. You open your mouth, expecting something new and exciting. What you get is nothing. The thick, grainy texture fills your mouth, a blandness so profound it's almost a flavor in itself. This is your introduction to maws, the absolute bedrock of the Greek diet. But in Sparta, it's elevated, or rather reduced to an art form of simplicity. It's barley, boiled with water into a thick porridge. Sometimes it's cooked into a dense, flat cake. There is no honey to sweeten it, no dash of milk to soften it, and certainly no exophanate, and certainly no exotic spices to live in it. It is pure, unadulterated fuel. You swallow. It's not revolting, not yet. It's just disappointing. You look up at your mother, perhaps with a questioning gaze, but her expression is neutral. This is food. You eat it. End of story. This is your first lesson in a philosophy you will live by for the rest of your days. Desire is a weakness. Food is for sustenance, not for pleasure. To crave flavor is to show a crack in your discipline. As you grow from a toddler into a young boy, your diet barely changes. Breakfast is barley porridge. Lunch is a hard barley cake. Dinner is more barley porridge. Occasionally, there are additions, but they rarely venture into the territory of exciting. A small piece of hard goat's cheese, tangy and salty. A handful of dried figs, their dense, gritty sweetness a shocking explosion of flavor in an otherwise barren landscape. On a very, very good day, you might get a taste of a wild pear, foraged from the hillsides. These are not treats, they are merely variations on the theme of utility. You see your father eat the same things. He is a Spartan warrior, a giant in your eyes, and he eats his bland portion with a quiet efficiency that you are taught to emulate. There is no talk of taste, no savoring of bites. You learn to eat quickly, without complaint, to fill your stomach and move on. Here's a small, peculiar detail about the Spartan palate. They had a deep-seated distrust for anything complex. Spices, intricate sauces, even the art of baking leavened bread were seen as signs of foreign decadence and moral decay. A chef from another Greek city-state, famous for his elaborate fish dishes or rich pastries, would be viewed in Sparta not with admiration, but with suspicion and contempt. Such a man, they believed, existed only to corrupt good men and make them soft. The blandness of your food is not an accident or a result of poverty. It is a carefully constructed wall against outside influence. Historians, poring over ancient texts, are still in a lively debate about the precise nutritional makeup of a young Spartan's diet before the age of 7. Did they get enough protein? Was it truly as monotonous as the legends say? Some argue that the accounts we have, mostly from non-Spartans like Plutarch or Xenophon, might have exaggerated the austerity to create a more dramatic, larger-than-life image of Sparta. They suggest that children likely had more access to things like wild vegetables, fruits, and small amounts of broth than the stark picture suggests. Others maintain that the descriptions of mere starvation diets were accurate, a deliberate policy to begin the toughening process as early as possible. You, however, are not a historian. You are a 6-year-old boy, and all you know is that your stomach often feels not quite full. You know that the sweetness of a single fig has to last you a week in your memory. You learn to watch the helots, the state-owned serfs who work the land, as they harvest the crops. They are the ones who grow the barley, press the olives, and herd the goats. They are a permanent, subjugated fixture of your world, and their labor provides the very stuff you so dispassionately consume. As your 7th birthday approaches, a new tension fills the air. You hear whispers about the Agoge. You see your mother looking at you with a rare, fleeting expression that might be mistaken for sadness. Your father begins to speak to you more of duty, of courage, and of the state. The simple, predictable life inside your family home is about to be violently upended. The barley porridge, the hard cheese, the occasional fig, this you now realize was the good life. It was the introductory course in Spartan cuisine. You are about to enroll in the advanced class, and the main course, you'll soon discover, is something far, far worse. The morning of your 7th birthday is unlike any other. There is no celebration, no special meal, no gifts. Instead, there is a sense of finality. Your mother, who has been your entire world, looks at you differently. Her usual stern composure has a crack in it. She hands you your morning portion of barley porridge, and her hand might linger on your shoulder for a moment longer than usual. This is her goodbye. Your father arrives. He doesn't say much. He simply nods, and you know it's time. You are given a single garment, a rough, tunic-like cloth called a chiton. It's thin, meant to be worn year-round, offering little protection from the cold winter winds or the scorching summer sun. This is a deliberate choice. You are to be toughened, and comfort is the enemy of toughness. You are not allowed shoes. You will walk barefoot, hardening your feet on the rocky soil of Laconia, until they are like leather. You leave your home, the only place you've ever known security, and you don't look back. Looking back is a form of weakness. You follow your father through the scattered, functional-looking buildings of Sparta. There are no grand monuments here, no bustling marketplace filled with colorful goods. It is a city built for purpose, not for beauty. Your destination is a series of plain, barrack-like buildings. This is the Agoge, the infamous Spartan military academy that will be your home, your school, and your tormentor for the next 13 years. As you approach, you see other boys your age, all with the same look of apprehension on their faces. Some are trying to look brave, puffing out their chests. Others are barely holding back tears. You stand among them, a new herd of recruits, about to be turned over to the state. Your father puts a hand on your shoulder. His grip is firm, a transfer of responsibility. Be a Spartan, he says. It is not a suggestion. It is a command. And then he turns and walks away, leaving you there. You are no longer his son, not in the way other Greek boys are. You are now a child of the state, a raw material to be hammered into shape. A man, older and scarred, with a whip in his hand, strides before your group. He is the paidonomos, the warden of the boys. He is a respected warrior, chosen for his severity and his unwavering commitment to Spartan ideals. His eyes sweep over you, and you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the morning air. His authority is absolute. He can, and will, flog you for any infraction, big or small. Here, you are stripped of your name and your individuality. You are now part of an agela, a herd or pack of boys. You will live together, then suffer together, and suffer together. The bonds you forge, you will not be of gentle friendship, but of shared hardship, a camaraderie born from enduring the same relentless pressure. This unit will become your new family, your primary loyalty, eclipsing even your loyalty to your parents. It's a strange and fascinating detail that the Spartans essentially outsourced parenting to the state. While an Athenian boy would be educated at home or by a chosen tutor, learning poetry, rhetoric, and philosophy, your education will be starkly different. You will learn to read and write, yes, but only enough for practical purposes, reading orders, sending messages. The bulk of your curriculum is physical running, jumping, wrestling, and learning to endure pain and hunger without complaint. Eloquence is discouraged. You are taught to speak in short, pithy, laconic phrases. A boy who is too chatty is a boy who is not focused. Historians have long been fascinated by the Agoge as a system of social engineering. Was it truly as monolithic and brutal as the ancient writers, particularly Xenophon, claimed? Xenophon was an Athenian who deeply admired Sparta, so some scholars suggest he may have romanticized its harshness, creating an idealized version of a system that was perhaps more varied in practice. Could there have been moments of kindness from the instructors? Were there different levels of severity depending on the boy or the era? The system lasted for centuries, so it almost certainly evolved. Yet, the core principle remained unshakable. The individual exists to serve the state, and the Agoge was the furnace where that individual was smelted down and recast. You are shoved into line, marched towards the mess hall for your first official meal as a ward of the state. The smell that wafts out to greet you is unfamiliar. It's acrid, metallic, and vaguely sour. It's a smell that doesn't trigger hunger but rather a slight, primal sense of alarm. The older boys, the ones who have been here for a few years, march with a grim resignation. They know what's coming. You file into a large, bare room with long wooden tables and benches. There are no decorations on the walls, no comforts of any kind. You take your place, sitting ramrod straight, your hands on your knees. Silence is mandatory. You look down at the bowl placed before you. It contains a liquid, a dark, almost black liquid with chunks of something unit and fightable floating in it. It's the moment you've been preparing for your entire short life. You've graduated from the blandness of barley porridge. Now, you face the legend. The barracks of the Agoge are your new world, and it's a world stripped of all softness. Your bed is not a bed. For the first few years, you sleep on the hard ground. As you get older, you are promoted to the privilege of making your own mattress. This involves going down to the Eurotis riverent with your bare hands, breaking off reeds. You are not allowed to use a knife or any tool. It is a lesson in resourcefulness and a way to toughen your hands. You weave these reeds together into a thin mat that offers only the barest illusion of comfort against the cold, damp earth. Your first night is a shock to the system. The collective body heat of dozens of other boys does little to warm the cavernous room. You lie there, listening to the unfamiliar sounds, the shuffling of bodies, the occasional stifled cough, the soft whimpers of the homesick boys who are swiftly and harshly silenced by the older prefects. There is no one to soothe you. You learn on that very first night that self-pity is a luxury you cannot afford. The darkness feels absolute. When you are woken before dawn, it is not by a gentle call, but by a sharp command or the crack of a whip, a gaze or a relentless cycle of grueling physical training. You run races in the frigid morning air, your bare feet pounding against the unforgiving ground. You practice wrestling, your small body thrown time and again into the dust by bigger, stronger boys. You learn the basics of using a spear, the wooden shaft feeling heavy and awkward in your hands. Every moment is a test. You are taught to endure the stinging cold of winter and the oppressive heat of summer in your single, flimsy tunic. Complaining is not an option. It is an invitation for punishment. The entire system is designed to peel away your individual weaknesses, to make you impervious to discomfort. But the most pervasive, the most gnawing hardship is the hunger. The food portions in the Agoge are intentionally, systematically meager. The barley cakes are smaller, the porridge thinner. It's a constant, dull ache in your stomach that never truly goes away. This isn't a bug in the system, it's the central feature. A well-fed boy is a complacent boy. A hungry boy is sharp, alert, and resourceful. Or so the theory goes. And this leads you to the mess hall, the heart of your daily gastronomic trial. On that first day, you stare into the bowl of black liquid. The older boys are already eating, their movements practiced and deficient. They dip their coarse barley bread into the broth and eat, their faces impassive. You watch them, trying to mimic their stoicism. You look at your own bowl. The smell is stronger now. It's a pungent mix of salt, vinegar, and something else, something metallic and rich that turns your stomach. This is melis, zeomos, the infamous Spartan black broth, the signature dish of a nation that prided itself on unpalatability. Fascinating, if disgusting. Tidbit about Spartan life is the sheer notoriety of this soup. It wasn't just a local dish, it was famous throughout the Greek world. But for all the wrong reasons. Other Greeks who prized fine wine, fresh fish, and savory roasted meats spoke of the black broth with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. It was a symbol of everything they found alien and barbaric about Spartan culture. It was, in essence, anti-food. Historians and food chemists have spent a surprising amount of time trying to reverse engineer the recipe for black broth, since no definitive one survives. The primary ingredients, as described by ancient writers, were pork, salt, vinegar, and pig's blood. The blood was likely the key ingredient, acting as a thickener and giving the soup its distinctive dark color, much like in modern blood sausages or black pudding. The vinegar would have been crucial, not just for flavor, but to prevent the blood from coagulating as it was cooked. The result would have been a salty, sour, and intensely savory broth, which, to a modern palate, might sound interesting, but for the ancient Greeks, accustomed to very different flavors, it was apparently vile. The debate among academics often centers on just how bad it really was. Was its reputation exaggerated by pampered Athenians who couldn't handle a bust flavor, or was it genuinely, objectively disgusting? A culinary trial by ordeal, given that even the Spartans themselves seem to have endured it. The evidence points towards the latter. It was medicine, not a meal. You, a 7-year-old boy on your first day, don't have the benefit of academic debate. You just have the bowl in front of you. You take your spoon, or more likely, just a piece of barley cake to use as a sop and dip it in. You raise it to your mouth, the smell filling your nostrils. You close your eyes and take your first taste. The shock is immediate. A wave of overpowering salt and sharp, acidic vinegar hits your tongue first, followed by a heavy, iron-rich taste of blood. The chunks you saw floating are bits of boiled pork, likely tough and stringy. It's unlike anything you've ever tasted. It's not just bland, it's actively unpleasant. It's a flavor profile that seems designed to be endured, not enjoyed. A wave of nausea rises in your throat. You want to spit it out, to push the bowl away. But you can't. The paid onomos is watching. The older boys are watching. To refuse your food is an act of defiance, an admission of weakness. It would earn you a flogging in the contempt of your peers. So you swallow. You force the mouthful down, your throat constricting. And then you take another. And another. You learn to shut down your sense of taste, to treat the act of eating as a mechanical necessity. This is your life now. This is the taste of Sparta. You survived your first encounter with the black broth, but that was just the beginning. It now becomes a twice daily ritual, a dark punctuation mark in your life of endless training. You never get used to it, not really. You just get better at ignoring it. You learn the trick of eating it quickly, of dulling your senses, of focusing on the gnawing emptiness in your stomach that the broth is supposed to fill. The bowl of melis zeomos is more than just a meal, it's a lesson. Each spoonful reinforces the core tenets of Spartan philosophy. It teaches you to reject pleasure. It teaches you that the needs of your body are secondary to the demands of discipline. It is, in its own strange way, a form of meditation, a daily practice in mastering your own disgust. Let's take a moment to really break down this infamous concoction, this culinary boogeyman of the ancient world. The name itself, melis zeomos, literally translates to black soup or black broth. The recipe, as we've pieced it together from fragmented ancient sources, is brutally simple. You start with pork, but not the prime cuts. You'd use the legs, the less desirable bits, boiling them for a long time until the meat is tender enough to fall apart. Then comes the star ingredient, pig's blood. Fresh, if possible. This was poured into the pot. And here's where the technique comes in. You have to stir constantly to keep it from turning into a solid, rubbery mass. The blood is what gives the soup its color, its name, and its powerful irony flavor. It's also a surprisingly rich source of protein and minerals, which was no small thing in a diet that was otherwise lacking. Finally, you add the flavorings, and in Sparta, flavoring means salt and vinegar. A lot of salt to preserve it and to make it well salty, and a healthy dose of vinegar. The acidity of the vinegar was crucial. It would have cut through the richness of the blood and fat, but more importantly, it was a chemical agent that helped to keep the blood in a liquid suspension. Without the vinegar, you'd end up with a pot of lumpy, coagulated blood clots. With it, you get a smoother, albeit still unsettling, broth. So, imagine the final product. A dark, murky liquid, somewhere between a soup and a stew, filled with shredded bits of pork. The taste would be an assault on the senses, intensely salty, sharply sour from the vinegar, with a deep, metallic, blood-and iron undertone. It's no wonder a famous story circulated in the ancient world about a man from Sybaris, a Greek colony in Italy known for its extreme luxury and fine dining. This Sybarite, through some twist of fate, found himself in Sparta and was obliged to try the black broth. After one mouthful, he reportedly shuddered and said, "Now I understand why the Spartans do not fear death." This anecdote, whether true or not, became the definitive review of Spartan cuisine. It perfectly captured how the rest of the Greek world saw them as a people who had willingly sacrificed every single pleasure of life at the altar of military prowess. What could death possibly hold to frighten a man who had to eat this every day? Now, here's a curious little detail that often gets overlooked. While the broth itself was legendarily bad, the piece of meat that came with it was a different story. Each member of the mess was entitled to a small, specific portion of the boiled pork from the stew. This portion was a mark of honor. A boy who showed particular bravery in training, or a man who was a hero in battle, might be awarded an extra portion of meat, a second helping. This was the Spartan equivalent of a medal. It was the highest culinary honor one could receive, and it shows how they cleverly turned even this disgusting meal into a tool for reinforcing their value system. But there's still a debate raging among historians and classicists. Was the black broth the daily, standard meal for everyone? Or was it reserved for the common soldiers in the mess halls? Did the kings and the elite eat it? To the official ideology says yes. In theory, all Spartans were peers, or homo ioi similar res, who ate the same simple fare to reinforce their equality. However, human nature is what it is. Some scholars argue that it's likely the elites and kings had access to better food in the privacy of their own homes, and that the public performance of eating black broth was just that, a performance. The evidence is thin, but it's a compelling idea that even in this most austere of societies, there might have been a bit of hypocrisy behind closed doors. For you, a boy in the Agoge, there is no such luxury. The black broth is your reality. You watch the older boys, the teenagers who are just a few years away from becoming full-fledged soldiers. They eat their broth without a flicker of emotion. They have mastered the art of endurance. You look at them and see your future. A future filled with endless bowls of this black, sour soup. A future where the highest reward you can dream of is just a second piece of stringy, boiled pork. It's a grim prospect, but it's the only one you have. So you lift your spoon and you eat. The gnawing ache in your belly becomes your constant companion. It's a dull, persistent emptiness that the black broth and barley cakes never quite manage to fill. You quickly realize that this isn't an oversight or a supply chain issue. This is deliberate. The hunger is part of your curriculum. State-sponsored starvation is a core pillar of the Agoge. The logic, from the Spartan perspective, is brutally straightforward. A boy accustomed to a full stomach becomes soft and complacent. He panics when rations run low on a campaign. He lacks the desperation that fuels cunning. But a boy who grows up in a state of perpetual hunger learns valuable lessons. He learns to ignore the distracting complaints of his own body. His senses become sharper, honed by the constant need to find his next meal. He becomes, in short, a more effective predator. This policy of intentional underfeeding was designed to make you tough, but also to make you a thief. And this is where the Agoge's educational philosophy takes a truly interesting turn. You and the other boys in your herd are not just hungry, you are actively, if unofficially, encouraged to supplement your diet by stealing. It starts subtly. You notice an older boy vanish into the twilight and return later, chewing on something he carefully conceals. You see a flash of movement near the kitchens where the helots work, a small shadow slipping away with the stolen cheese. There's a silent, unspoken understanding among the boys the official rations are for survival, but to truly thrive, you must forage for yourself. The targets of your budding criminal career are varied. You might try to sneak into the communal storerooms, a high-risk, high-reward venture. Or you might trade the personal farms and gardens of the adult Spartans, a dangerous game, as they are not known for their forgiving nature. The most common targets, however, are the helots, the serfs who work the land. Their modest homes, their vegetable patches, their chicken coops, these become the training grounds for your new skills. You learn to be silent, to move like a ghost in the shadows. You learn to read the patterns of the guards, to know when the paid onomos is looking the other way. You work with the other boys in your pack, creating distractions, acting as lookouts. A successful heist, a clutch of eggs, a loaf of rough bread, a handful of olives is a victory celebrated in hushed whispers in the dark of the barracks. The stolen food, eaten quickly and furtively, tastes infinitely better than anything you are officially given. It's the tasted success of cunning, of survival. This brings us to a really peculiar aspect of Spartan ethics. Stealing in itself was not considered a crime. In fact, it was seen as a valuable military skill. A soldier who could successfully infiltrate an enemy camp and steal their supplies was a hero. Therefore, teaching boys to steal was just practical field training. The real crime, the unforgivable sin, was not the act of stealing. It was the clumsiness of getting caught. If you were caught in the act with your hand in the bread bin or a stolen fig in your mouth, the punishment was immediate and severe. You would be dragged before the other boys, and you would be brutally flogged. Not for the theft, the instructors would remind you, but for your incompetence. You failed the test. You were not sneaky enough, not quiet enough, not quiet enough, not clever enough. You brought shame upon yourself, not because you were a bad thief. This policy created a high-stakes, real-world exam that you had to take every single day. Hunger was the motivation, theft was the assignment, and a brutal whipping was the penalty for failure. It was a perfect, self-contained system for breeding soldiers who were resourceful, audacious, and utterly terrified of failure. There's a strange little historical side note here concerning Spartan attitudes towards property. Because they de-emphasized personal wealth with their weird iron rod currency and focus on communal living, their concept of ownership was different from, say, a merchant in Athens. A certain amount of borrowing from the community, especially for a boy in the Agoge, he was almost seen as a natural part of the ecosystem. The food was there, you were hungry, and if you were good enough to take it, you deserved it. It was a kind of survival of the fittest approach to pantry raiding. Of course, the historical accuracy of this encouragement to steal is, like many things about Sparta, a subject of debate. The primary source for this is Xenophon, the Athenian admirer of Sparta. Did he accurately report the system, or did he exaggerate it to make the Spartans seem even more cunning and hardcore than they really were? Some historians argue that it's unlikely this was a formal, state-sanctioned policy. Instead, It might have been more of a boys will be boys situation, where the authorities simply turned a blind eye to a certain amount of petty theft, knowing it was an inevitable consequence of keeping the boys perpetually hungry. The official flogging for being caught could have been a way to maintain a veneer of discipline while unofficially acknowledging the necessity of the act. But for you, crouching in the bushes behind a helot's hut, the academic nuances don't matter. Your stomach is a hollow pit. You can smell bread baking. The risk is immense, but the potential reward is intoxicating. This is your life now, a constant calculation of risk versus reward. A tightrope walk between a full belly and a back laid open by the whip. The hunger, you now understand, is not just a feeling. It's a tool, a teacher, and a relentless motivator. It is forging you into something sharp, dangerous, and uniquely Spartan. The art of the steel becomes your most important subject, a shadow curriculum running parallel to your endless drills and wrestling matches. Your first few attempts are clumsy, fueled more by desperation than skill. You might get spooked by a snapping twig or the bark of a dog, scurrying back to the barracks empty-handed, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. But you learn. You have to. You start to observe the world with a new kind of intensity. You're no longer just a boy, you're a hunter, and the entire world is your hunting ground. You learn that the best time to move is at twilight, when the shifting shadows provide natural cover. You learn to walk heel to toe, a silent, rolling gait that minimizes noise. You learn to listen, to distinguish the sound of a guard's patrol from the rustling of leaves in the wind. Your primary school is the countryside around Sparta. You and your pack, your age will venture out, not as a rambling group of boys, but as a coordinated unit. One boy acts as the lookout, perched in a tree with a view of the path. Another creates a diversion, perhaps throwing a stone to draw a farmer's attention to the far side of his field. While the owner is distracted, you and another boy slip into his garden. Your hands move with a newfound quickness, snatching radishes from the earth, plucking unripe figs from a low-hanging branch. You don't take much, never enough to make the loss obvious. A little here, a little there. The goal is to feed yourself, not to get caught. You become a student of human nature. You learn which helots are more vigilant, which farmers are more complacent. You learn the rhythms of the day, when the kitchens are busiest and least guarded, when the storerooms are left unattended for a precious few minutes. Your senses, sharpened by chronic hunger, are extraordinary. You can smell a hidden loaf of bread from yards away. Your eyes, accustomed to the dim light of the barracks, can pick out the faint outline of a chicken coop in the moonless night. The most famous story about this practice, one that every Spartan boy would have known, is the tale of the boy and the fox. As told by Plutarch, a young boy from the Agoge, he had successfully stolen a live fox, intending to eat it later. He hid it under his tunic. But on his way back, he ran into some of the adult instructors. They began to question him. To reveal the fox would be to admit his theft and, worse, his cleverness in hiding it. To be caught would mean a flogging for his failure to conceal the evidence. So, the boy stood there, answering their questions calmly, while the cornered fox, hidden beneath his clothes, began to claw and bite at his stomach. The boy never flinched, never cried out, and stood stoically until the animal had literally disemboweled him and he dropped dead at the feet of his instructors. This story, while almost certainly an exaggeration, was the ultimate lesson. It wasn't about the tragedy of the boy's death. It was about his incredible self-control. He won. He won. He was not caught. He died with his honor intact, having proven his mastery over pain and his commitment to the rules of the game. This was the gold standard you were meant to aspire to. A little-known fact about these foraging expeditions is that they weren't just about stealing prepared food. A huge part of this education was about learning to live off the land itself. The older boys would teach the younger ones which wild roots were edible, which berries were safe to eat, and how to track and trap small game like birds or hares. This wasn't just for supplementing their diet in the Agoge, It was essential training for a future soldier on campaign. An army that can feed itself from the surrounding countryside is a fast and unpredictable army. So your criminal activities were, in fact, basic training in military logistics and survival. The question of morality in this system is something historians still puzzle over. How does a society function when it teaches its children that theft is acceptable? The key, it seems, lies in the highly specific context. Stealing was only acceptable for boys in the Agoge and only as a means of supplementing their deliberately meager rations. An adult Spartan stealing from another adult Spartan would have been a serious crime, state-sanctioned period of lawlessness with a very specific educational goal. It's a concept that is deeply alien to modern ethics, but it fit perfectly within the Spartan worldview. Was this system a brilliant, if brutal, method of education, or was it a sign of a society with a deeply dysfunctional moral compass? The debate is ongoing. Tonight, you're part of a team of 3. Your target is a small out bustling where a Hellenic family stores their winter supply of cheese. It's a moonless night, perfect for your work. Your friend, Lycurgus, is the lookout. Your other friend, Nikos, is ready to create a diversion. You are the infiltrator. You wait for Lycurgus on signal the soft hoot of an owl. It comes. Nikos tosses a rock against the far wall of the main hut. You hear red or creak open the grumbled curse. You slip through the darkness, a shadow among shadows. The door to the storage hut is latched but not locked. You slide it open, the wood groaning softly. The rich, earthy smell of goat cheese fills your nostrils, and for a moment, your hunger is so overwhelming it's almost painful. You grab a small wheel of cheese, tuck it under your tunic, and slip back out into the night, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. You made it. Tonight, you will eat well. And you weren't caught. You and your friends gather in the darkest corner of the barracks, huddled together, a tiny conspiracy of shadows. You pull the wheel of cheese from under your tunic. It feels heavy, substantial, a treasure beyond measure. Nikos, the master of diversion, keeps watch at the entrance, while you and Lycurgus break the cheese apart with your hands. The smell is intoxicating, a world away from the sour reek of black broth. You take your first bite. The sharp, salty, tangy flavor explodes in your mouth. It's rich, creamy, and utterly magnificent. This is not the hard, dry cheese you are sometimes given with your rations. This is the real thing, cheese made with care and meant to be savored. You eat your portion quickly, ravenously, but you force yourself to make it last, to imprint the memory of this flavor on your mind. This is the taste of victory, of a mission accomplished. But the thrill of success is always shadowed by the fear of its opposite failure. And in the Agoge, failure is a public spectacle. A few days later, a boy from another herd, a younger boy named Damas, is not so lucky. His hunger got the better of his caution. He was caught trying to steal a warm loaf of bread directly from the hands of a Hellenic woman near the main kitchens. It was a clumsy, desperate act, and his mistake was fatal. He isn't just reprimanded. He is dragged into the central courtyard of the barracks. The paid onomos orders all the boys to assemble. You stand in silent, rigid formation, your gut twisting with a mixture of pity and a cold, sharp sense of relief that it wasn't you. Damas stands alone in the center, trembling. He's not crying, he knows better than that, but his face is pale with terror. The paid onomos addresses the assembled boys, his voice like cracking stones. He doesn't lecture about the evils of theft. He doesn't talk about morality or respecting property. He talks about incompetence. This boy, he bellows, pointing at Damas, has brought shame upon us. He has brought shame upon himself, not because he was hungry. Hunger is your companion. It is your teacher. He is shamed because he was foolish. He was clumsy. He was clumsy. He was seen. A Spartan is a ghost. A Spartan is a shadow. This boy is a blundering fool, and a fool is a liability to the state. Then, 2 of the older prefects, teenagers themselves, step forward. They hold long, thin whips made of leather. They grab Damas, pulling his tunic away to expose his back. And then the flogging begins. The whips whistle through the air and land with a sharp, wet crack. Red welts rise instantly on the boy's skin. Damas clenches his jaw, his body rigid. The first rule of punishment is that you do not cry out. To show pain is to give your punisher a victory. It's the ultimate test of the principle drilled into you from day one. Master your body. Master your emotions. You watch, your own back muscles tightening in sympathy. You've been whipped before, for minor infractions, a moment of inattention during drill, the hesitant response to a question. But this is a formal, ritualized punishment, designed not just to inflict pain but to impart a lesson to everyone watching. The lesson is simple: do not get caught. A strange and little-known aspect of Spartan punishment is that it was often outsourced to the boys themselves. The older boys in the Agoge, the prefects or irenes, were given authority over the younger ones. They were expected to test, discipline, and punish the boys in their charge. This wasn't just a way to save the adults some work, it was a crucial part of leadership training. It taught the older boys how to command, how to enforce discipline, and how to be ruthless when necessary. It created a brutal but effective hierarchy within the Agoge itself. Historians are still untangling the complex web of honor and shame in Spartan society. Was the shame of being caught really more powerful than the physical pain of the flogging the ancient courses, written by men like Plutarch, certainly present it that way? They paint a picture of a society where public disgrace was a fate worse than death. However, it's also possible that this is an idealized view. Some scholars argue that we should be cautious about taking these accounts at face value. Perhaps the fear of the whip was a more powerful motivator than these philosophical accounts admit. A young boy, after all, is a young boy, and pain is a very real and immediate deterrent. The truth probably lies somewhere in between a potent cocktail of physical fear and profound social shame. The flogging continues. Each crack of the whip echoes in the silent courtyard. Damas's back is a crisscross of red lines, some of them starting to bleed. But he remains silent. His legs are shaking, but he does not fall. He is passing the second test, the test of endurance. He failed at being a thief, but he will not fail at being a Spartan under punishment. Finally, the paid onomos gives a signal. The whips stop. Damas is released. He stumbles but catches himself, pulling his tunic back over his raw skin. He walks, head held high, back to his place in the formation. He has paid the price for his incompetence. The matter is closed. You look at him, and then you look at your own hands. You remember the feeling of the cheese, the taste of your successful theft. The lesson sinks deeper into your bones than any lecture ever could. The hunger will return, and you will steal again. You have to, but you will be better. You will be invisible. You will not be the one standing in the center of the courtyard. Days bleed into weeks, and weeks into years. Your life in the Agoge settles into a rhythm, a relentless beat of training, discipline, and hunger. The initial shock wears off, replaced by a hardened resignation. This is your world, and its flavors, or lack thereof, are the only ones you know. Beyond the infamous black broth, which remains the grim centerpiece of your evening meal, your diet is a testament to the virtues of monotony. It's a closed loop of the same few ingredients, served with an almost religious lack of imagination. The architects of your life believe that variety breeds desire, and desire is the first crack in the shield wall of a Spartan's soul. Your morning starts not with a smell, but with a sound, the clanging of a bell, or a shouted order that rips you from your reed bed. You stumble to the mess hall, and waiting for you is the familiar sight of your breakfast. It's maza, the barley porridge you first tasted as a child. But the Agoge version is thinner, more watery. It's a gray, gritty gruel served lukewarm in a clay bowl. There is no honey, no fruit, no pinch of salt. It is fuel, pure and simple, designed to get you through the morning's brutal physical exertion and nothing more. You eat it quickly, mechanically, your mind already on the wrestling match or the foot race to come. Lunch, if you can call it that, is often eaten on the move. It's a barley cake, but calling it a cake is a generous act of marketing. It's a disc of baked barley flour and water, so hard you could probably use it to knock a bird out of a tree. It's dense, dry, and tastes faintly of dust. You learn to break off small pieces and let them soften in your mouth before you can chew and swallow. It's portable, it doesn't spoil, and it provides a slow release of energy. It's the perfect soldier's ration, and you are a soldier in training. This barley-centric diet was not unique to Sparta. It was the staple for many poorer people across the ancient Greek world. Wheat bread, the soft, leavened kind we think of today, was more of a luxury. Barley was hardier, easier to grow in the thin, rocky soil of Greece, and thus cheaper. The Spartan wish was to take this common peasant food and make it the mandatory diet for their ruling warrior class. An Athenian aristocrat would dine on fine wheat bread, but a Spartan king was, in theory, expected to eat the same hard barley cake as the lowest-ranking soldier. The third pillar of your diet, alongside barley and the black broth, is cheese. Not the creamy ritual you stole on that memorable night, but a hard, sharply salty goat or sheep's cheese. It's served in small, ration cubes. The saltness is a feature, not a bug. It helps you retain water during your grueling exercises under the hot Peloponnesian sun. It's also a good source of protein and calcium, a practical addition to an otherwise carb-heavy diet. And then there are the figs. Dried figs are the Spartan version of candy. In a world devoid of sweetness, the intense, sugary punch of a single dried fig is a sensory explosion. They are doled out sparingly, a reward for a well-executed drill or an answered question. You learn to eat them slowly, nibbling tiny bites to make the flavor last as long as possible. A fig could be the highlight of your entire week. A weird little detail about the Spartan supply chain is where these figs and cheeses came from. As a Spartan peer, you and your family owned land, a specific plot called Achaeo Eros, but you didn't work it. The land was tilled, planted, and harvested by the Helots, the subjugated population tied to that land. Each year, your family's Helots were required to deliver a fixed amount of produce, a certain measure of barley, wine, cheese, and figs to your family, who then contributed it to their communal mess hall. This was the rent. Anything the Helots produced above that quota, they could keep for themselves. This system freed you up for a lifetime of military training, your entire existence subsidized by the labor of an enslaved class. Historians are still debating the precise quantities and logistical details of this system. Known as the apophora, how was the quota calculated? How strictly was it enforced? Did it leave the Helots enough to live on? Or were they systematically starved? As well, the picture is incomplete. But it's clear that the Spartan utopia of equality and military focus was built on a foundation of brutal exploitation. The bland food you eat is a direct result of this oppressive social structure. So this is your culinary landscape. A recurring cast of four main characters: the grey porridge, the hard cake, the salty cheese, and the rare, precious fig. There are no other vegetables to speak of, no fresh fruits, no variety of meats. It is a cuisine as harsh, minimalist, and repetitive as the life you lead. You see the older boys, the men, eating the same meal. There is no expectation of change. No hope for a more interesting dinner tomorrow. This is it, the flavor of the state. It shatters any romantic fantasy you might have had about hearty warrior feasts. In Sparta, you don't feast. You refuel. In the monotonous landscape of your diet, there is one glorious, exhilarating exception: the hunt. Hunting is not just a pastime in Sparta, it's a vital part of your education and a rare opportunity to taste something other than barley and boiled pork. It begins when you are a young teenager. The Paedonomos will select a group of older boys, those who have shown promise in their stealth and endurance. You are taken out of the barracks, away from the city, and into the rugged wilderness that surrounds Sparta. The air here is different, cleaner, scented with pine and wild thyme. This is the domain of boars, deer, and hares. Your primary weapon is the spear, the same one you practice with endlessly in the courtyard. But out here, it feels different. It's not a clumsy wooden pole anymore, it's a tool, an extension of your arm. You are also taught to use nets and traps, learning the patient art of anticipating an animal's path. The hunt is a test of all your Spartan virtues. It requires discipline and teamwork. You must work together with your pack, fanning out in a silent line to drive the prey towards a designated spot. It demands silence and stealth, the same skills you've been honing while stealing cheese. A single misplaced step, a snapped twig, could alert your quarry and ruin the entire effort. The most prized prey is the wild boar. These are not domesticated pigs, they are formidable, dangerous animals, armed with sharp tusks and a notoriously aggressive temperament. To face a charging boar with nothing but a spear is a true test of nerve. It's a dance of life and death, requiring precise timing and unwavering bravery. The boy who lands the killing blow earns immense respect. Let's say today is a good day. After hours of tracking, your group manages to corner a young boar. There's a flurry of action, shouted commands, the desperate squeal of the animal. It's a chaotic, visceral moment. One of the older boys, an Iran named Praxoes, bravely stands his ground, plants his spear, and fells the beast. The hunt is over. The tension breaks, replaced by a raw, triumphant energy. You and the other boys gather around the fallen animal. This is not just a trophy, it is food. Real, substantial, flavorful food. That night, back at a designated campsite or even in the barracks, there is a rare exception to the usual culinary misery. A fire is built, and the boar is butchered with practiced efficiency. The smell of roasting meat fills the air, a rich, savory aroma that makes your mouth water and your stomach clench with anticipation. This is a smell you almost never experience. In Sparta, roasting meat was considered a sign of decadence. Boiling was the preferred, more austere method of cooking, but a successful hunt allows for a temporary suspension of this rule. When the meat is cooked, it is distributed among the hunters. You are given a piece of roasted boar. It's hot, greasy, and smoky. The fat crackles, and the meat itself is tough but packed with a wild, game-like flavor that is absolutely electrifying to your deprived palate. You eat with your hands, the juice dripping down your chin. This single piece of meat is more satisfying than 100 bowls of black broth. It's a reward you have truly earned, the direct result of your skill, your courage, and your teamwork. One little-known fact about Spartan hunting is their use of dogs. The Lycurgus hound was a famous breed in the ancient world, prized for its stamina, intelligence, and hunting prowess. These dogs were not pets in the modern sense. They were highly valued working animals, essential partners in the hunt. A young Spartan would learn to work with these dogs, to read their signals, and to trust their instincts. The bond between a Spartan hunter and his hounds was one of deep, mutual respect built on shared purpose. The role of hunting in Spartan society is another area where historians find nuance and debate. Was it primarily a military training exercise, as Xenophon suggests, a way to practice tactics and foster bravery, or was it also a crucial source of protein for the elite warrior class? Some economic historians argue that the Agoge's meager rations would have led to malnutrition without the regular supplement of hunted game. They propose that hunting wasn't just a bonus but a necessary part of the economic and nutritional system that sustained the Spartan warriors. It's a classic was it for culture or for calories debate. For you sitting by the fire, chewing on a piece of boar, the academic debate is meaningless. You feel a deep, primal satisfaction. Your belly is full for once. You have tasted real food, earned through your own prowess. You look around at the faces of your comrades, their features illuminated by the flickering firelight. There's a bond here, forged not just in shared suffering, but in shared triumph. These hunting expeditions are rare flashes of vibrant life in an otherwise gray existence. They are a reminder that the world contains flavors beyond salt, vinegar, and barley. But they are also a perfectly integrated part of the system. The pleasure you feel is not a violation of Spartan principles, it is a direct consequence of them. You are rewarded not with luxury, but with the fruits of your own martial virtue. The hunt tree enforces the ultimate Spart unless in glory and satisfaction are not given. They are taken with a spear in the wild hills of home. At the age of 20, you graduate from the Agoge. You are no longer a boy, but a man. You have survived the beatings, the hunger, and the relentless training. You are now a full citizen of Sparta, a homo ios, one of the similar res or peers. It's a moment of immense pride. You have earned your place in the most elite warrior society in the known world. But if you think your graduation means an upgrade in your dining options, you are sorely mistaken. In fact, in some ways, it gets worse. You don't get to go home and eat with a wife and family. You don't get to choose what you eat for dinner. Instead, you are now required to join SYS City on a public mess hall. This will be your new family for the next 40 years. Think of it as a fraternity, but with mandatory attendance and terrible food for the rest of your life. Every male citizen, from the lowest ranking soldier all the way up to the kings, was required to belong to one of these dining clubs and to eat his evening meal there every single night. To miss a meal without a valid excuse, like being on a hunt or performing a sacrifice, was a serious social offense, resulting in fines and disgrace. You are assigned to a mess group of about 15 men. These are the men you will fight alongside in the phalanx. You will live with them, train with them, and, if necessary, die with them. The nightly meal is the foundation of this unbreakable bond. It's where camaraderie is forged and maintained. The rules of the SYS City are rigid. You must contribute your share of provisions each month from your personal estate, the caleros worked by your helots. This is that same quota of barley, cheese, figs, and wine. Failure to make your contribution meant losing your citizenship. It was a brutally effective way of ensuring everyone pulled their weight and of weeding out anyone whose estate was failing. Your right to be a Spartan was directly tied to your ability to provide a monthly bag of groceries. You walk into the mess hall for your first dinner as a full member. The room is plain, functional, just like the one in the Agoge. The men are already there, reclining on simple wooden couches. The atmosphere is different, though. It's not the tense, fearful silence of the boys' barracks. There's conversation, but it's restrained, purposeful. Young men like you are expected to be mostly silent, to listen and learn from the veterans. And then the food arrives. Your heart sinks just a little. A cup of wine, heavily diluted with water, a piece of the hard barley bread, and a bowl steaming with the unmistakable, pungent aroma of black broth. You've been eating this for 13 years, and your reward for becoming a man is more of it. It's the ultimate symbol of Spartan equality. No matter your rank or heroism, you all dip your bread into the same black soup. Here's a quirky detail about mess hall etiquette. Conversation was highly structured. The talk was supposed to be serious and educational. The older men would often pose questions to the younger ones, testing their wits and their understanding of Spartan values. Joking was permitted, but it had to be a specific type of dry, lock and acquit. Frivolous chatter was frowned upon. It was like a nightly, mandatory dinner in December. One of the most interesting rituals involved the bread. Each man was given his portion of bread, and he would use it to vote. If the mess was considering a new member to join their group, a secret ballot was held. A servant would come around with a container, and each man would drop in a piece of his bread. If he approved of the candidate, he just dropped it in as his. But if he disapproved, he would squeeze it tightly in his fist first, flattening it. This was called the cod. Disco's vote. Even a single flattened piece of bread was enough to blackball a candidate. It meant that every member of the mess had to be acceptable to every other member, ensuring a high level of group cohesion. The academic debate surrounding the Spartan is fascinating. Was it primarily a military institution, designed to build unit cohesion for the phalanx, or was it a political tool, a way for the state to control the daily lives of its citizens and enforce a radical form of equality? Plutarch, our main source, emphasizes the character-building aspects, learning temperance, listening to wise elders, and so on. But modern historians often see it as a powerful mechanism of social control. By forcing all men to eat together every night, Sparta prevented the formation of private factions, suppressed the accumulation of personal wealth, and ensured that every citizen was constantly under the watchful eye of his peers. Your dinner wasn't just dinner, it was a daily reaffirmation of your submission to the state. As you sit there, sipping your watered-down wine and preparing to face yet another bowl of black broth, you realize the truth. The Agoge never really ends. It just changes its name. The surveillance continues, the discipline is unrelenting, and the food remains a trial to be endured. You look at the weathered faces of the older warriors around you. They have been doing this for decades. This is their life. This is your life. And the taste of it, as always, is the taste of iron, vinegar, and duty. As you settle into the routine of the Spartan, you become acquainted with another pillar, the Spartan dining culture, wine. But just like with their food, the Spartan approach to wine is all about control, discipline, and teaching by negative example. Each man in the mess receives a daily ration of wine. It's a local vintage, likely rough and strong, produced by the Helots on your own estate. But you are never, ever allowed to drink it neat. The wine is always served in a kilix, a wide, shallow drinking cup, and it is heavily diluted with water, often 3 or 4 parts water to 1 part wine. To drink undiluted wine was considered the height of barbarism, a practice of foolish, uncontrolled foreigners. The Spartan goal was not to get drunk. Drunkenness was a state of chaos, a loss of self-mastery, the ultimate personal failure. The purpose of the wine was to encourage conversation, to relax the men just enough to speak their minds, but never so much that they lost their wits. It was a social lubricant, applied with medicinal precision. The diluted wine is still wine, however. It has a tart, slightly fruity taste that helps to wash down the grim combination of barley bread and black broth. It's one of the few genuine, albeit muted, pleasures of the meal. You learn to sip it slowly, to make it last the entire evening, a skill of moderation that is highly prized. But the most powerful lesson about alcohol is not taught through your own consumption. It's taught through ritualistic humiliation. This is where the Helots come in again. Periodically, as a form of educational entertainment, the leaders of your mess hall will stage a chilling spectacle. They will force a group of Helots to drink large quantities of undiluted wine. The Helots have no choice but to obey. They are made to drink until they are utterly, disgustingly drunk. Then, these unfortunate men are dragged into the middle of the mess hall. They stumble, they slur their words, they vomit, they sing ridiculous songs, they lose all control of their bodies and their dignity. They are a living, breathing demonstration of everything a Spartan is not supposed to be. The EP horrors or the older men will point to the Helots and say to you and the other young men, "Look, this is what happens when a man is a slave to his appetites. This is what it looks like to lose control. Let this sight be imprinted on your mind, so that you never ever allow yourself to fall into such a state." You watch this scene unfold, and it is deeply unsettling. It's a calculated act of cruelty, designed to instill a lesson through revulsion. You see men who you know from the fields reduced to pathetic figures of ridicule. The lesson is brutally effective. The image of the staggering, incoherent Helot becomes a powerful deterrent. You associate drunkenness not with fun or release, but with slavery, shame, and a complete loss of honor. This practice is one of the starkest examples of the master-slave relationship in Sparta. A strange and frankly disturbing fact is that the Helots were not just forced to get drunk, they were also compelled to sing demeaning songs and perform clumsy, foolish dances, all for the edification of their Spartan masters. It was a form of psychological warfare, constantly reinforcing the Helots' perceived inferiority and the Spartans' supposed natural superiority. This ritualized humiliation of Helots is a dark corner of Spartan history that generates considerable debate among scholars. The accounts we have come almost exclusively from non-Spartan writers like Plutarch, who wrote centuries after the fact. Did this happen as regularly and as formally as he describes? Was it a universal practice in all the mess halls? Some historians argue that it might have been an exaggerated story, part of the black legend of Sparta, that highlighted their cruelty. Others contend that such a brutal psychological tool is entirely consistent with the Spartan mindset and their constant fear of a Helot uprising. After all, the Helots vastly outnumbered the Spartan citizens, and maintaining control required not just physical force, but constant psychological intimidation. You sit there, sipping your heavily watered wine. The image of the humiliated Helot burned into your memory. It works. The last thing you would ever want is to resemble that man. Your own self-worth, your identity as a Spartan, is defined by being his opposite: sober, controlled, and always master of yourself. The wine in your cup no longer tastes of simple pleasure. It is now imbued with a lesson. It tastes of moderation, of discipline, and of the profound, dark gap that separates you, the citizen, from the slaves who serve you. It is yet another way that the simple act of consuming something, in this case, wine, is twisted into a to-love state ideology. In Sparta, even a drink is not just a drink. It is a statement of who you are, and more importantly, who you are not. Life as a Spartan warrior is governed by a strict calendar of religious duty. Festivals honoring the gods are frequent and taken with the utmost seriousness. In other Greek cities, a major religious festival is an excuse for a feast, a day of public banquets with roasted oxen, overflowing wine, and joyous celebration. So, as a major festival to Apollo or Artemis approaches, a small, hopeful part of you might wonder, will we finally get a decent meal? The answer, you learn quickly, is a resounding no. A Spartan festival is not an excuse to let loose. It is an occasion for even greater discipline and reverence. While the religious rituals are elaborate and precise, the feasting that follows is, by any other standard, a joke. On a festival day, you might gather in a larger, more public setting than your usual mess hall. There's a tangible sense of occasion in the air. Sacrifices are made, perhaps a goat or even a bull is offered to the gods on a great altar. The smoke from the sacrificial fire curls into the sky, carrying the prayers of the city with it. You watch with solemnity, participating in the hymns and the sacred procession. It's a powerful communal experience. And then comes the banquet. You take your place, expecting something special, and what you get is a slightly more generous portion of the usual fare. The main dish is, more often than not, a variation on the theme of boiled meat. The animal that was just sacrificed to the gods is butchered, and the meat is distributed among the citizens. But it's not lovingly roasted over an open flame. It is, predictably, boiled, often in a great public cauldron, to ensure it can be distributed fairly, undeficiently. So your festival feast consists of a piece of boiled beef or goat, probably a bit stringy, served alongside your usual barley cake. It's more meat than you normally get, and it's not from a pig, so that counts as variety. But it's still just boiled meat. There might be a special cheese or a slightly larger ration of figs. The wine might be a little less diluted than usual, a gesture of festive generosity. But there are no rich sauces, no spiced dishes, no elaborate pastries. The core principle of Spartan austerity holds firm, even in celebration. A particularly interesting, then somewhat bizarre delicacy associated with these festivals was a dish called epikl. On it was essentially a dessert, but a dessert only a Spartan could love. The exact recipe is lost to time, but from what historians can piece together, it seems to have been a kind of pudding or cake made from barley meal, olive oil, and cheese, which was then boiled. Imagine a dense, savory, oily barley and cheese cake. That was the sweet treat you got to look forward to on a special occasion. The steadfast commitment to blandness, even during celebrations, was a point of pride. It was a way of showing the gods their piety not through extravagant offerings, but through their unwavering discipline. They believed that the gods, like them, valued strength and self-control over luxury and indulgence. A feast of simple, boiled meat was seen as a more honest and worthy offering than a decadent banquet. This leads to a fascinating debate among historians of religion. Did the Spartans genuinely believe their gods preferred simple food? Or was this a convenient theological justification for their pre-existing cultural values? It's a chicken and egg problem. Did their harsh, minimalist culture shape their view of the gods, or did their interpretation of the gods enforce their harsh, minimalist culture? Many scholars believe the former is more likely. A society built on discipline and austerity would naturally create gods in its own image, stern, demanding, and unimpressed by frivolity. The gods' preference for bland food was a perfect divine endorsement of the Spartan way of life. You look around at the other men, your comrades, eating their boiled meat and their oily barley cheese cake. There is no wild revelry, no boisterous laughter. There is a sense of solemn satisfaction of a duty properly performed. They are honoring the gods in the only way they know how, by being relentlessly, unchangeably Spartan. You eat your portion. It's better than black broth, you have to admit. The boiled beef is a welcome change of texture and flavor. But as you chew, you can't help but think of the stories you've heard about festivals in places like Athens or Corinth, tales of endless food, sweet wine, music, and dancing that lasts all night. It sounds like another world, a world of softness and joy that is utterly alien to you, but you push that thought away. That is the world of the undisciplined. Your world is here, in this public square, eating this simple meat. Your joy is not in the flavor of the food, but in the knowledge that you are part of something greater, a city-state so unified, so disciplined, that even its celebrations are a form of military drill. The festival ends, you go back to your barracks, and you know that tomorrow, the black broth will be waiting for you. In its own strange way, is a comfort. It's the taste of consistency, the taste of whole. As you enter your late teens, just before you graduate into a full citizen and join your public mess, you may be selected for the ultimate Spartan test. It is a trial so secret and so brutal that it is spoken of only in whispers. It is the cryptii. The word itself means the secret thing or the hiding. It's not part of the regular Agoge curriculum. It's an advanced, postgraduate course in terror and survival, reserved for the most promising, and perhaps the most ruthless, of the young trainees. If you are chosen by the EP-whores, the 5 elected magistrates who hold immense power in Sparta, and a terrifying one, you are sent out from the city with nothing. No food, not even a proper weapon. You are given only a knife. Your instructions are simple: survive. You are to hide during the day, sleeping in the hills and caves, or in the dense undergrowth. You must remain unseen. Your time to operate is at night. Under the cover of darkness, you are to move through the Laconian countryside, living off the land and hunting. But your prey is not a boar or a deer. This is the darkest and most controversial aspect of Spartan training. The purpose of the cryptia was twofold. First, it was the ultimate survival test. Could you live alone in the wild, with only your wits and a single blade to sustain you? You had to steal food, find water, and endure the elements completely on your own. It was a final, brutal exam of all the skills you had learned, but its second purpose was far more sinister. It was an instrument of state terror. Your mission was to patrol the Helot villages at night, to listen for any signs of dissent, any whispers of rebellion. The Helots vastly outnumbered the Spartans, and the constant fear of an uprising was the defining paranoia of Spartan society. The Cryptia was the secret police, the state's clandestine enforcers, tasked with keeping the Helot population terrified and subdued, and the mission often went beyond surveillance. According to sources like Plutarch, the members of the Cryptia were authorized to kill any Helot they found out on the roads at night. They were specifically tasked with identifying and eliminating the strongest, proudest, and most capable Helots, the ones who might have the potential to lead a revolt. It was a preemptive strike against any possible leadership among the slave class. Imagine yourself in this role. You are 19 years old, alone, and your stomach is a hollow knot of hunger. You spend your days shivering in a ditch, watching a Helot farm from a distance. You see the family working in the fields, their lives dictated by the seasons and the demands of their Spartan masters. During the day, they are people. At night, they become targets. As darkness falls, you slip out of your hiding place, your knife cold in your hand. The hunger is a physical pain now. You see a light in the distance, a small Helot farmhouse. Your training from the Agoge takes over. You move silently, using the shadows, your senses on high alert. You are no longer just a boy stealing cheese, you are a predator, an agent of the state. Your food on this mission is whatever you can kill or steal. Eat chicken from a coop, vegetarian from a garden, or the rations you might take from a lone traveler. The diet of a member of the Cryptia was the most extreme live-off-the-land experience imaginable. It was a diet of pure opportunism. Whatever you could catch, find, or take was your meal for the day. A small strange detail that emerges from this is the likely consumption of things a normal Spartan would never eat: insects, grubs, wild plants that were barely edible. It was about survival at its most raw and basic level. The very existence of the Cryptia is one of the most hotly debated topics among classicists. Was it a real, formal institution as described by Plutarch and Plato, or was it more of a boogeyman story, a legend created by Sparta's enemies to paint them as monstrously cruel? Or perhaps it was a tale the Spartans themselves encouraged to help keep the Helots in line. Some scholars argue that it couldn't have been a permanent institution, but perhaps a special measure taken only during times of crisis. Others maintain that it was a rite of passage for the future leaders of Sparta, a final, bloody initiation into the realities of power and control. The evidence is scarce and oft uncontradictory, leaving the true nature of this secret thing shrouded in mystery. You are hiding in the bushes near a crossroads, a notorious spot for your kind of work. You hear footsteps. A large man, the Helot known for his strength and his defiant gaze, is walking home late from a neighboring farm. He is exactly the type of man you have been warned about. He represents a potential threat. Your heart pounds. This is not a drill. This is not a practice wrestling match. This is the culmination of your entire life's training. All the hunger, all the discipline has led to this moment, alone in the dark with a knife in your hand. What you do next will define you. Whether you let him pass, or you follow your brutal orders, the experience changes you. You survive your time in the Cryptia. When you finally return to Sparta, you are gaunt, weathered, and your eyes hold a new, chilling maturity. You have seen the true, ugly underside of the system that made you. You understand now, in your bones, what it takes to maintain the Spartan state, and you know that the bland food in the mess halls is the price you pay for this order, an order maintained not just by discipline, but by a secret, ruthless violence in the dark. You return from the Cryptia a changed man. Or perhaps you weren't chosen for that dark path, and you simply reached the age of 30. This is the next major milestone in a Spartan man's life. At 20, you became a soldier. At 30, you become a full citizen with all its rights and responsibilities. You are now allowed to marry, to grow your hair long, a distinctive mark of a Spartan warrior, and to participate in the assembly, the citizen's body that voted on matters of state. You might think that reaching this level of seniority, of having a wife and a home of your own, would finally liberate you from the communal mess hall. You imagine, perhaps, quiet evenings at home, eating a meal prepared by your wife, the meal that doesn't involve black broth. This is a lovely fantasy, and it is completely wrong. Your graduation to full citizen status changes almost nothing about your dining habits. You are still, and will continue to be, obligated to eat your main evening meal at the SYS City and with the men of your unit. This obligation continues until you are 60 years old and retired from military service. For 40 years of your adult life, your dinner is state mandated, so you get married. You have a household, but your wife runs it largely without you, especially in the evenings. You might see her and your children during the day, but dinner time belongs to the state. This system was deliberately designed to prevent men from becoming too attached to the comforts of home and family. A man's primary loyalty was not to his wife, but to the men in his mess. The shield wall was more important than the hearth. The food remains exactly the same. The monthly contribution from your kale arrows is still required. The menu is still the familiar rotation of black broth, barley cakes, and a sliver of cheese. The wine is still watered down. The conversations are still about matters of war and state. Nothing has changed. This relentless consistency was the point. It was a powerful symbol that even as you aged and gained status, you were still, at your core, a homo ios similar. You were no better than the 20-year-old new recruit sitting at the other end of the bench. Your shared experience of enduring the same terrible food, night after night, year after year, was the glue that held the phalanx together. It stripped away ego and reinforced the collective identity. A small, and rather sad, detail about Spartan married life is how a husband and wife even met in the first place. A man would often visit his wife by sneaking out of the barracks at night, much like he did when he was a boy stealing food. The first few years of a marriage might be conducted in secret, clandestine visits in the dark. This was, again, by design. It was thought to keep the passion in the relationship high and to prevent men from becoming too domesticated. But what happens when you finally do retire at the age of 60? Your military obligations are over. You are now an elder, a respected figure whose opinion holds weight. You can finally, after a lifetime of communal dining, eat at home. You can enjoy a meal prepared by your wife, surrounded by your grown children. So what does that first, glorious meal of freedom taste like? What culinary delights await you after 60 years of institutional food? The answer is deeply, hilariously, and disappointingly Spartan. Your diet doesn't really change. The household pantry is stocked with the same ingredients as the communal mess: barley, cheese, figs, and the products of your own estate spigs. Your wife has been running a Spartan household her whole life. She doesn't know how to cook elaborate Athenian dishes, nor would she want to. The food at home might be prepared with a little more care. The porridge might be a bit thicker. The barley cakes might be served warm. You might get a larger portion of cheese, but you are not suddenly going to be eating roasted peacocks and honey-glazed pastries. Your palate, your very idea of what food is, has been shaped by a lifetime of austerity. Complex flavors would likely seem strange and vaguely unsettling to you. You are a product of your environment, and your environment was relentlessly bland. The question of whether Spartans ever got to enjoy good food is a source of historical debate. Did a retired elder, a man of wealth and status, truly stick to the simple fare, or did they, in the privacy of their homes, indulge in slightly more luxurious meals? Some historians argue that human nature must have prevailed. It's hard to imagine a powerful man, free from the daily scrutiny of the mess hall, not allowing himself some small comforts, perhaps a bit of honey in his porridge, or a piece of game hunted not for training but for pleasure. But any such indulgence would have been discreet. To live lavishly, even in retirement, would have been a violation of the entire Spartan ethos and would have invited public scorn. You are now 65 years old. You sit in your own home, a grandfather, a respected elder. Your wife places a bowl in front of you. It's a thick, savory stew. It's not the black broth of the mess hall, but it's made from the same humble ingredients from your own land. It's simple, nourishing, and deeply familiar. You eat, not with the grim endurance of your youth, but with the grim endurance of your youth, but with a quiet sense of peace. You have done your duty. You have served the state. It is the taste of your entire life, a life of discipline, honor, and unwavering purpose. It is the taste of coming home, even if home tastes suspiciously like the barracks you just left. We've spent all this time in your shoes, as a Spartan boy and man, enduring a culinary life sentence of blandness and broth. But what about the other half of the population? What were Spartan women eating while you were off at your nightly mess hall meetings? The answer is surprisingly different, and it reveals a great deal about Sparta's unique and very pragmatic view of gender roles. While you were being systematically underfed in the Agoge, to make you tough and weary, your sister was at home, being fed a proper, nutritious diet. Spartan girls did not attend the Agoge, but they had their own state-mandated education system. It was less about enduring hunger and more about building strength. They engaged in rigorous physical exercise, running, wrestling, throwing the discus and javelin. They were expected to be as physically fit as the boys. The reason for this was simple and unsentimental. The primary duty of a Spartan woman was to produce strong, healthy babies for the state. A weak, malnourished woman was likely to produce a weak, malnourished infant, an unacceptable outcome in a society obsessed with quality control from birth. Therefore, feeding the women well was not an indulgence, it was a state investment in the future of the army. So, while you were surviving on watery porridge and stolen scraps, your sister was likely eating a much more balanced and substantial diet. She would have had greater access to the full range of produce from the family estate. More fruit, more vegetables, and quite possibly a larger share of dairy products like milk and cheese. The goal for a young woman was not to be lean and hungry, but to be robust and healthy. Once married, a Spartan woman's diet remained superior to her husband's. While you were at the SYS city undutifully choking down your black broth, she was at home. And at home, she was the mistress of the household food supply. She managed the storerooms which held the barley, cheese and figs from the kale arrows. She had first access to anything grown in a household garden, perhaps some greens, onions, or legumes. This meant her daily meals were likely far more varied and palatable. She could bake barley cakes with a bit of cheese mixed in. She could make a porridge sweetened with figs. She could have a fresh salad of wild greens drizzled with olive oil. These were simple pleasures you, as a man, were denied for most of your life. A really fascinating and little-known detail is the role of Spartan women inheriting and managing property. Unlike in other Greek city-states where women had very few legal rights, Spartan women could inherit land and manage their own property. At its peak, it's estimated that women owned or controlled somewhere between 1/3 and 2/5 of all the land in Sparta. This gave them an extraordinary degree of economic power and independence compared to their Athenian counterparts. This control over land also meant control over food production, further solidifying their role as the gatekeepers of the household's nutrition. Of course, the healthiness of the female diet is a topic of academic discussion. Historians debate whether this difference in diet was an official, state-mandated policy or simply the natural outcome of the social structure. Some argue that the accounts of women eating better might be exaggerated, a way to highlight the extreme deprivation of the men. Others maintain that the logic is undeniable if your society's primary goal is military reproduction. It makes perfect sense to ensure the producers are well nourished. The evidence from ancient writers like Xenophon and Aristotle, who both commented on the relative freedom and physical fitness of Spartan women, seems to support the idea that they were, indeed, treated differently when it came to food. So, let's paint a picture. It's evening. You are sitting on a hard bench in the mess hall, staring into your bowl of dark, sour soup. The air is thick with the smell of vinegar and the sound of terse, manly conversation. Meanwhile, a few hundred yards away, your wife is at home. The atmosphere is completely different. She might be sitting with her mother or her daughters. The meal is simpler, yes, but it's wholesome. A thick lentil soup, perhaps, seasoned with herbs from the garden. A fresh barley loaf, still warm. A bowl of ripe olives and a generous piece of cheese. The wine she drinks is likely still watered down. Moderation was a virtue for everyone, but the entire experience is more relaxed, more nourishing. She is not eating this way out of indulgence. She is eating this way because it is her duty. Her body is a vital resource for the Spartan state, and she is maintaining it, just as you maintain your skills with the spear. Her healthy meal is as much a part of the war machine as your terrible one. It's one of the great ironies of Spartan life. The men, the supposedly superior gender who held all the political power and fought all the battles, were subjected to a lifetime of culinary punishment. The women, who were excluded from politics and warfare, got to eat better. It's a perfect example of how Spartan society was driven not by sentiment or trigonometric logic. Everything and everyone served a purpose, and your purpose was to endure hunger, while hers was to stay healthy. We have seen the world through the eyes of a Spartan parent. Consider the life of a Spartan woman. But there is another, much larger group of people whose perspective is crucial to understanding the Spartan food chain, the Helots. They are the silent, invisible foundation upon which the entire system is built. You are a Helot. You are not even a person. In the eyes of the state, you are property. Your ancestors were conquered by the Spartans centuries ago, and their land, this very land you are now working, was taken from them. You are bound to this land. This kale arrows into the Spartan family that owns it. You can be bought, sold, or killed at your master's whim. Your entire life is a paradox. You are the one who grows the food, yet you have the least claim to it. Your days are spent under the hot sun, your hands calloused and your back aching from the labor of plowing the fields, harvesting the barley, tending the olive groves, and herding the goats. You are the source of all the ingredients that make up the Spartan diet, from the barley for their cakes to the pigs for their black broth. At the end of the harvest, the most anxious time of the year arrives. Your Spartan master, or his representative, comes to collect the apophora, the annual rent. It's a fixed, substantial amount, a specific number of dim and Hawaii barley, a quantity of wine, cheese, and figs. You must hand it over, no matter what. It doesn't matter if your harvest was poor due to drought or blight. The quota is absolute. Failure to meet it could have dire consequences for you and your family. Only after this tribute is paid is the remaining produce yours to keep. This is what you and your family will live on for the entire year. On a good year, with a bountiful harvest, you might have a reasonable surplus. On a bad year, you are left with barely enough to survive. So what does your dinner table look like? It is, in some ways, a mirror image of your master's, yet completely different. You eat the same core ingredients, because it's what you grow. Barley is the staple of your diet, just as it is for the Spartans. You eat it as a thick porridge or a coarse, dark bread. But you also have access to things your masters, in their austere mess halls, do not. You have the scraps of the agricultural process. You can forage for wild greens and herbs to add to your stews. You have access to legumes like lentils and beans, which were not a standard part of the elite Spartan diet. Your food, while simple, might actually be more varied and flavorful than the monotonous fare of the SYS Scythian. You might cook your food with a bit of garlic or onion, simple flavorings that would be seen as unnecessarily complex by the warrior class. A little known but poignant detail is that helots were sometimes allowed to own a small number of personal livestock. A few chickens for eggs, perhaps a goat for milk. These were a vital source of protein and a small measure of wealth. An egg, fried or boiled, would be a luxury. The milk from your goat would make your children's porridge far more nourishing than the watery gruel served in the Agoge. The great historical debates surrounding the helots is their standard of living. Were they brutally oppressed and systematically starved, living on the brink of destitution, or was their situation more akin to medieval serfs, with a hard life but a reasonable degree of self-sufficiency? The ancient sources are conflicting. Some, like the Athenian writer Lycurgus, portrayed the helots as living in constant fear and misery. He claimed that Spartans even had a rule forcing helots to wear demeaning leather cap and animal skins, a constant reminder of their servile status. Others suggest that because the quota was fixed, in a good year a helot could become relatively prosperous, perhaps even better off than a poor citizen in another Greek state. The truth is likely complex and varied depending on the time period and the individual master. The most terrifying part of your existence is the constant, looming threat of the cryptia, the secret police who could murder you with impunity. You watch your strongest sons and boldest friends, and you worry for them, knowing that any sign of pride or leadership could make them a target. And then there is the ritualized humiliation. You are the one forced to drink the undiluted wine and be paraded as a drunken fool for the education of the young Spartans. You are made to be a living symbol of everything they despise. You watch the Spartans from a distance. You see them in their identical red cloaks, marching in perfect formation. You see them eating their strange, disgusting black broth in their exclusive clubs. You grow the pigs, but you would never dream of eating that concoction of blood and vinegar. Your own food is simpler, more honest. A stew of lentils and wild herbs, a piece of dark bread, a cup of watered wine. You look at your children, their faces smudged with dirt from playing in the fields. You know the life of hardship that awaits them. They will work this same land, serve the same masters, but you also see a flicker of something else in their eyes, a resilience, a connection to the land that the Spartans in their barracks and mess halls have lost. They eat what you provide, but they do not know the soil. You do. Your food is the taste of survival, of enduring, of waiting. It is the taste of the earth itself, a silent promise that you are still here, long after the strange rituals and brutal discipline of your masters have faded into history. You might wonder, why didn't the Spartans just import better food? They were the military superstars of the Greek world. Surely they could have traded for fine wines from the Aegean Islands, exotic spices from the East, or premium olive oil from Attica. In an age when other Greek city-states were minting beautiful coins of silver and gold, creating vibrant economies based on trade and commerce, Sparta deliberately chose to use one of the most impractical and useless forms of currency imaginable: iron rods. Imagine trying to go grocery shopping with a 3-foot-long iron bar. According to the stories from writers like Plutarch, Spartan currency, known as Rs, consisted of these heavy, brittle iron rods. To make them even more useless, the legendary Spartan lawgiver Lycurgus supposedly had them treated with a vinegar bath while they were red hot, making the iron brittle and worthless as scrap metal. The purpose of this bizarre monetary policy was explicitly to kill the economy, at least as far as luxury were concerned. It was a brilliant, if extreme, piece of social engineering. You couldn't exactly hide your life savings under the mattress when your savings consisted of a literal ton of iron bars stashed in your barn. This made the accumulation of personal wealth incredibly difficult and conspicuous. So how did this affect your dinner table profoundly? Since you couldn't easily trade with the outside world, you were forced to be almost completely self-sufficient. This is why your diet was so relentlessly local and monotonous. You ate what you could grow on the land around you: barley, pigs, goats, figs. There was no bustling port in Sparta filled with merchants from Egypt and Persia selling their wares. The state simply didn't allow it. This economic isolationism was a core part of the Lycurgan reforms, the set of laws that structured Spartan society. The goal was to eliminate the inequalities and corrupting influences that wealth brings. If no one would be tempted by bribery, luxury, or a soft lifestyle. It was another way to enforce that radical equality of the homo. Everyone was kept in a state of government-mandated, simple living. This iron currency had another, more direct consequence on your diet. It killed any incentive for culinary innovation. Chefs and skilled cooks, who could command high prices in cities like Athens or Corinth, had no reason to come to Sparta. What would they be paid in a cartful of useless iron rods? The very profession of a gourmet chef was seen as a sign of decadence and was actively discouraged. The only cooks you had were the helots or state servants who knew how to do one thing: boil the ingredients provided from the kale, arroyo in the most efficient way possible. A funny, little-known anecdote that illustrates this involves a foreign merchant. The story goes that a trader, after much difficulty, managed to haul a cart of his goods to Sparta, hoping to do business. He was paid in the local iron currency. To get his payment home, he needed a team of oxen and a sturdy wagon. The sheer logistical nightmare of Spartan commerce was the best defense against it. Of course, the reality of this iron currency is a major point of contention for historians and archaeologists. For a long time, no physical examples of these iron rods had ever been found, leading many scholars to believe they were more of a myth or a moralizing story than a reality. It seemed too perfectly symbolic, a tale told to emphasize Sparta's uniqueness. However, in the 20th century, archaeologists excavating near Sparta didn't uncover large bundles of iron spits that could fit the description, lending some credibility to the ancient accounts. The debate now centers on how long this system was actually in use and how strictly it was enforced. Was it a feature of early, archaic Sparta that was later abandoned, or did it persist alongside a black market of conventional silver and gold coins? By the time Sparta became a major power in the 5th and 4th centuries BC, it's almost certain that their leaders and generals were dealing with standard Greek currency when on campaign abroad. You can't pay for mercenaries or bribe foreign politicians with brittle iron rods. So a deep hypocrisy likely developed. The state officially preached the virtues of its simple, iron-based economy at home, while its leaders engaged in the realities of a silver-based international world. But for you, an ordinary Spartan citizen eating in your mess hall, the official policy was all that mattered. The iron curtain of your currency kept the world of flavor out. Your bland diet wasn't just a matter of taste or tradition, it was the direct result of a radical economic experiment. The state had decided that a healthy treasury was a sign of a sick society. They chose ideological purity over economic prosperity, and the consequences were served up in your bowl every single night. The black broth wasn't just soup. It was the taste of a closed economy, a flavor profiled, dictated by a profound and deeply ingrained fear of the outside world. For years, the Spartan diet has been your entire world. The black broth, the barley cakes, the watered-down wine. This is simply what food is. You have nothing to compare it to. But eventually, as Sparta's influence grows and it engages more with the wider Greek world, you start to encounter outsiders. A diplomat from Athens, a trader from Corinth, or even a king from a foreign land might visit your city. And it is through their eyes, through their shocked and horrified reactions, that you truly begin to understand how uniquely terrible your cuisine is. Imagine a scene in your SYS city. A guest is present, a wealthy merchant from Sparta, a city in southern Italy so famous for its luxury that the word Sybaritic still means fond of sensual pleasures. He has been invited to dine with your mess as a gesture of formal hospitality. He reclines awkwardly on the simple wooden couch, trying to mask his discomfort. He is accustomed to soft cushions, fine linens, and the music of the lyre during his meals. Here, there is only the sound of men eating and the stark and decorated walls. Then the food is served. A helot places the standard fare before him: a rough barley cake, a cup of diluted wine, and a bowl of the melus. C.O. Moss the merchant, used to artfully prepared dishes of fish, game, and delicate pastries, stares into the murky, dark liquid. A faint, unsettling smell of vinegar and blood reaches his nostrils. He watches as you and your comrades dip your bread into the broth and eat with grim efficiency. Politeness dictates that he must partake. He forces a smile, dips a small piece of his barley cake into the soup, and raises it to his lips. He takes a single, hesitant bite. His face tells the whole story. A brief flicker of shock, quickly suppressed, followed by a wave of disbelief. His palate, trained on subtle and complex flavors, is being assaulted by a blunt instrument of salt, sour, and iron. He struggles to swallow, his throat constricting. He takes a hasty gulp of his watered-down wine to wash the taste away. It is in this moment that he utters the now immortal line, the most famous food review in ancient history. He puts down his bread, looks around at the stone-faced Spartans enjoying, or at least enduring their meal, and says with a shudder, "Now I truly understand why you Spartans have no fear of death." This story, or versions of it, was told and retold throughout the ancient world. It became the defining anecdote about Spartan life. It was hilarious to the Athenians, horrifying to the Corinthians, and a perfect encapsulation of Spartan otherness to everyone. It confirmed what they all suspected, that to be a Spartan was to live a life so devoid of pleasure that the oblivion of death seemed like a reasonable alternative. Another famous visitor, albeit a royal one, was the king of Pontus, the kingdom on the coast of the Black Sea. He had heard tales of the legendary Spartan broth and, out of a morbid curiosity, he hired a Laconian cook and ordered him to prepare the dish. The king took one spoonful and immediately spat it out in disgust, declaring it vile. The cook, unperturbed, simply replied, "O king, to be able to enjoy this broth, you must first have swum in the river Eurotas." His point was clear: you couldn't just taste the broth. You had to earn it. You had to have endured the Agoge, the beatings, the hunger, the cold. The broth wasn't a dish, it was the culmination of a brutal lifestyle, and only those who had lived it could stomach it. A lesser-known but equally telling detail comes from the reactions of other Greeks to Spartan soldiers on campaign. When Spartan armies traveled, their logistical train was famously simple. They carried their own barley, salt, and cheese. They didn't expect or demand lavish provisions from their allies. In fact, other Greek soldiers were often amazed and slightly appalled at the Spartans' ability to subsist on what they considered starvation rations. A Spartan could happily make a meal of a dry barley cake and some water, while an Athenian soldier might be grumbling about the lack of wine and olive oil. The academic debate here isn't about whether the food was bad. The consensus is pretty clear on that front. The question is how the Spartans themselves perceived these outside reactions. Did they feel a sense of shame, a recognition of their own provincialism, or did they feel pride? All the evidence points to the latter. They embraced their reputation for terrible food. It was a badge of honor. The disgust on a visitor's face was a validation of their own moral and physical superiority. It was proof that their system was working, that they had not gone soft like the rest of Greece. You watch the Sybarite merchant push his bowl away, a polite but firm refusal to take another bite. You don't feel insulted. You feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. He doesn't get it. He can't. He sees a disgusting soup. You see a symbol of your equality, your discipline, your strength. His revulsion is a compliment. It confirms that you are different, that you are harder, that you are harder, that you are better. You pick up your bread, dip it once more into the black broth, and eat. It tastes, as always, like victory. Your training in the Agoge, your graduation, into the SYS city and your entire life of disciplined austerity have all been preparation for one thing: war. When the summons comes, you leave your home, take your place in the phalanx alongside the men from your mess, and you march. And as you march, you get a new appreciation for the Spartan way of eating. Because while your diet at home is a tool for building character, your diet on the road is a marvel of military logistics. The Spartan army was famous for its ability to travel light and fast. While other armies might be slowed down by elaborate supply wagons carrying tents, cooking equipment, and diverse foodstuffs, your logistical train is brutally efficient. Each soldier is responsible for carrying his own provisions, and those provisions are as minimalist as you'd expect. In a small sack slung over your shoulder, you carry your campaign rations. The contents are no surprise. The star of the show is, once again, barley, not as porridge or fresh cakes, but as pre-toasted barley meal, or ALP hide. It's dry, lightweight, and nutrient-dense. To make a meal, you simply mix a handful of it with water in your cup to create a simple, no-cook paste. It's gritty, bland, and deeply uninspiring, but it provides the slow-release carbohydrates you need to march all day and fight a battle. Alongside your barley meal, you carry a small bag of salt, essential for replacing what you lose through sweat. You also have a hard, dry piece of cheese, which provides protein and fat and doesn't spoil easily. And, if you're lucky, a handful of dried figs or olives for a bit of flavor and a quick burst of energy. That's it. That is the fuel for the most feared war machine in Greece. This brings us to one of the most practical, if unglamorous, reasons for the Spartan diet. It made you an incredibly low-maintenance soldier. You didn't need elaborate camp kitchens. You didn't need to forage for firewood to cook a complex meal. You could make your dinner standing in a rainstorm with a cup and a water skin. This gave Spartan commanders immense strategic flexibility. Your army could move faster, cover more ground, and operate in areas where other, more pampered armies would struggle to find supplies. A quirky and very Spartan detail of campaign life was the okopaion, or the wooden cup. This simple, carved wooden cup was an essential piece of every soldier's kit. It was your plate, your bowl, and your drinking glass, all in one. But it also had a secondary, more ingenious function. According to some ancient writers, the dark, murky color of the cup's wood was deliberately chosen to hide the sediment and impurities in the water you'd often have to drink from streams and ponds on the mart. Even your cup was designed to help you endure unpleasantness without complaint. But what about the black broth? Did you have to cart around pig's blood and vinegar on a campaign? Thankfully, no. The black broth was a feature of the permanent mess halls at home. On the road, practicality trumped tradition. There was, however, a campaign equivalent, though it's less well documented. Soldiers would likely have carried strips of dried, salted pork, a primitive form of jerky, which could be chewed on the march or, if time permitted, boiled with their barley meal to create a more substantial, savory stew. It wasn't a black broth, but it followed the same principle of being a simple, pork-based, one-pot meal. The logistics of feeding an army in the ancient world is a subject of constant study and debate for military historians. How did they ensure a steady supply of grain and water? How did they manage foraging without losing discipline? The Spartan model is often held up as a masterpiece of minimalism. However, some historians argue that its advantages might be slightly exaggerated. A Spartan army operating far from home for an extended period, like during the decades-long Peloponnesian War, couldn't just live out of their personal sacks. They would have had to establish supply lines, demand provisions from allies, and forage just like any other army. The real Spartan advantage, these scholars suggest, was not in their logistics alone, but in their soldiers' mentality. You were simply conditioned to tolerate hardship and scarcity far better than your opponents. Your greatest logistical asset was your own stomach. You are on a long march through the Peloponnese. The sun is beating down and dust coats your throat. The men around you, The same faces from your mess hall march in silence. At midday, the commander calls a brief halt. You find a spot of shade under an olive tree, pull out your wooden cup, and pour in some water from your goatskin bag. You add a handful of barley meal and stir it with your finger. As you eat your bland, gritty paste, you watch a group of allied soldiers from Corinth nearby. They are grumbling. Their supply wagon, carrying wine and oil, has broken an axle. They complain about the heat, the dust, the poor quality of the local water. They look at your simple meal with a mixture of pity and disgust. You feel neither. This is normal. This is normal. This is what it takes to win. The blandness you are tasting is the taste of readiness. The simplicity of your meal is the source of your speed. While your enemy is worrying about his dinner, you are worrying about the coming battle. Your entire life has been a training exercise for this very moment, teaching you to subordinate every personal comfort to the needs of the mission. Your food, once again, is not just food. As you grow older, moving from a young soldier to a seasoned veteran, you begin to see the bigger picture. You start to understand that the terrible food you've eaten your entire life isn't just a series of random, cruel traditions. It's not about making you suffer for the sake of suffering. It's all part of a single, coherent, and deeply ingrained philosophy. The blandness has a purpose. The hunger has a meaning. The first and most obvious pillar of this philosophy is equality. The Scythian, with its mandatory attendance and identical meals, is the great equalizer of Spartan society. It doesn't matter if you are from a slightly wealthier, more ancient family or a less distinguished one. It doesn't matter if you are a newly minted 20-year-old or a decorated hero of 50. In the mess hall, you are all the same. You all eat the same miserable black broth from the same simple bowls. This nightly ritual demolishes class distinctions and personal ego. It constantly reminds you that your identity is less important than your membership in the collective of Homo. The phalanx works because every man trusts the man standing next to him as an equal. The shared meal is the foundation of that trust. The second pillar is discipline. Your entire life has been an exercise in mastering your appetites. From the moment you were weaned onto bland barley porridge, you were taught that desire is a weakness. To crave a sweet pastry, a savory roast, or a cup of undiluted wine is to show a crack in your self-control. A man who cannot control his own stomach, the thinking goes, cannot be trusted to control his fear in battle. The daily endurance of unpalatable food is a form of meditation, a constant training of the will. It forges an inner resilience that makes you impervious not just to bad taste, but to hardship, pain, and fear. The third pillar is military readiness. This is the most practical aspect of the philosophy. Your simple, monotonous diet makes you the perfect soldier. You are not dependent on luxuries. You are accustomed to scarcity. Your body is a lean, efficient machine, fueled by the most basic of ingredients. This translates directly into strategic advantage. Your armies can travel faster and lighter, and your soldiers can endure campaigns that would break the morale of more pampered troops. The state's ancient hunger of the Agoge and the blandness of the Scythian are, from a military perspective, just brilliantly effective conditioning programs. A strange but telling detail that highlights this philosophy is the Spartan view on obesity. In a world where being plump was often a sign of wealth and status, in Sparta it was a mark of shame. An overweight citizen could be publicly mocked and even fined by the whores. There are accounts of magistrates physically measuring young men to ensure they maintain their weary, athletic builds. Fat was seen as the physical manifestation of indiscipline and luxury, a clear sign that a man was failing in his duty to keep his body a perfectly tuned weapon for the state. This entire philosophical framework, the intertwining of food, equality, and military virtue, is what makes Sparta so fascinating to historians. But they are still debating its origins and effectiveness. Was this system truly designed from the top down by a legendary lawgiver like Lycurgus, as the Spartans themselves believed, or did it evolve more organically over centuries, a series of traditions that gradually hardened into a rigid ideology. Most modern historians lean towards the latter, seeing Lycurgus as more of a symbolic figurehead for a long process of social change. The philosophy might not have been a grand blueprint, but rather a post hoc justification for a set of customs that proved effective for survival and warfare in the harsh environment of the Peloponnese. You are now a man in your 40s. You sit in your mess hall, watching the younger men. You see the faint grimace on a new member's face as he tries the black broth for the first time. You remember that feeling. But now, you understand it differently. You see the whole system at play in that one bowl of soup. You see the equality in the fact that your bowl is identical to his. You see the discipline in the way the older men eat without complaint. You see the military readiness in the knowledge that this simple, unappealing fuel is what makes your army unbeatable. The food still tastes bad. It will always taste bad, but it no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like a choice. It is the price your society has consciously chosen to pay for its freedom, its strength, and its unique place in the world. The philosophy isn't written in books, it's ingested. You don't just learn what it means to be Spartan, you consume it. Day after day, one bowl of black broth at a time. And in this strange, unappetizing way, it becomes a part of you. You've lived your whole life with the black broth, the barley cakes, and the iron currency. To you, these are bedrock truths, the unchanging pillars of your world, established by the great lawgiver Lycurgus himself. But if you could step outside of time, you would see that the story is much messier, and that future historians would spend centuries arguing over the very details you take for granted. Let's start with the most famous dish, the black broth. You know it as a soup of pig's blood, pork, salt, and vinegar. But is that the definitive recipe? The truth is, no complete, step-by-step recipe for Melis Siomos has ever been found. Our knowledge is cobbled together from scattered, often brief mentions in a variety of ancient texts, written by non-Spartans like Plutarch, who lived hundreds of years after Sparta's prime. This leaves historians with a host of nagging questions they still debate. Was pig's blood always the key ingredient? Or was that just a feature of its most infamous version? Some scholars have suggested that the black might have sometimes come from other ingredients, like slow-cooked lentils or even dark wine. Was it always a thin broth, or did it sometimes have the consistency of a thick stew? Was the meat always pork, or did they use goat or mutton when a pig wasn't available? Food historians and classicists have even tried to recreate the broth in modern kitchens, with wildly varying and almost universally unappetizing results. The official recipe, you know, might just be one version of a dish that changed over time and place. Then, there's the issue of the Agoge and its institutionalized starvation. You experienced it as a deliberate policy, keep the boys hungry to make them tough and encourage them to steal. This is the classic version of the story, thanks to writers like Xenophon. But how systematic was it really? Here, the academic world is sharply divided. One school of thought takes the ancient sources at their word, arguing that this brutal system of underfeeding and sanctioned theft was a core, unchanging feature of Spartan education. But another group of historians urges caution. They argue that these accounts might be heavily romanticized or exaggerated. They point out that a society that systematically starves its future soldiers risks creating a generation of stunted, unhealthy men. This seems counterintuitive for a state so obsessed with physical perfection. This camp suggests the hunger might have been more of a seasonal reality or a rhetorical trope about discipline rather than a literal, daily policy of malnutrition. The debate essentially boils down to were the Spartans brilliant social engineers, or just incredibly harsh and possibly reckless ideologues? We simply don't have the hard archaeological or documentary evidence to say for sure. And what about the iron money? The story of the brittle iron rods is iconic. But as we touched on, its reality is fiercely debated. The lack of major archaeological finds for a long time made many scholars skeptical. Even with the discovery of some iron spits, questions remain. Was this currency used for all transactions? Or only for official state business? How did Spartans pay for things when they were abroad? The most likely scenario, which many historians now accept, is a dual currency system. The iron rods were the official, ideological currency used within Sparta to maintain the illusion of an austere, closed society. But on the side, a black market of silver and gold coins almost certainly existed for foreign dealings and perhaps even for private transactions among the elite. The simple ironclad world you believe in was probably a much more complex and hypocritical economic reality. One of the most obscure but interesting tidbits historians argue about is the Spartan relationship with fish. The Eurotas River flowed right by Sparta, and the city wasn't far from the sea. Yet, fish is almost entirely absent from descriptions of the Spartan diet. This is bizarre for a Greek cultural taboo. Did they consider fishing a less noble pursuit than hunting, or is it simply an omission in our sources? And they actually ate fish all the time. It's a small, nagging question, but it highlights how much we still don't know about the daily realities of your life. You, as a Spartan, would be baffled by these debates. To you, the broth is the broth, the hunger was real, and the money is iron. Your world is one of certainty, defined by tradition and law. But for those looking back, your life is a fascinating puzzle with many missing pieces. The story of your food, which seems so simple and straightforward to you, is in fact a complex narrative full of scholarly arguments, historical mysteries, and questions that may never be answered. The taste of your life is clear to you, but its exact ingredients are lost to time. For generations, the Spartan machine has run on the fuel of austerity. The iron currency, the closed borders, the monotonous diet, these have been the walls protecting you from the corrupting influence of the outside world. But no wall can stand forever. It begins subtly. It starts with victory. In the year 400 BC, Sparta finally triumphs over its great rival Athens at the end of the long and grueling Peloponnesian War. Victory brings power, but it also brings something Sparta has resisted for centuries: wealth. Suddenly, vast quantities of Athenian silver and gold flood into the city as spoils of war. Your leaders, men who grew up preaching the virtues of simple iron rods, are now responsible for managing a treasury overflowing with foreign riches. The official ban on owning gold and silver is still in place, but the temptation is immense, and hypocrisy begins to creep in, like a vine through the cracks in a stone wall. You start to hear stories. Whispers of a general who returned from a campaign abroad with a fortune in silver, hiding it with a friend in a neighboring region. Tales of powerful men using their influence to acquire land and resources far beyond their traditional chaos. Pharaohs, the rigid equality of the homoi begins to fray at the edges. And as wealth trickles in, so does the desire for the things wealth can buy. The lure of luxury, so long held at bay, begins its slow, insidious invasion. And it starts, as it so often does, with food. You might notice it first in the mess hall of a particularly powerful or well-traveled citizen. Perhaps the wine is a little less watered down than it used to be. Perhaps the portion of boiled pork on a festival day is a bit more generous, a bit more tender. These are small changes, but they are significant. Then, you might see a market stall, tucked away in a corner, selling something new. A trader from a coastal town, emboldened by the changing times, might be selling salted fish. It's an exotic delicacy, and men who have secretly accumulated some silver coins might buy it to eat in the privacy of their homes, away from the judgmental eyes of the SYS citizen. A fascinating sign of this cultural shift is the changing role of the cook. For centuries, the cook was a low status servant, a boiler of meat. But as wealth and foreign influence grow, so does the demand for better preparation. A rich Spartan might hire a cook from another city, a man who knows how to roast meat until it's succulent, who can craft a savory sauce, who understands the art of baking leavened bread. These chefs were the secret agents of decadence, smuggling flavor into a society that had officially outlawed it. This gradual erosion of the old ways creates a deep tension in Spartan society. The older generation, the men who truly lived and breathed the austere code, look upon these changes with disgust. They see the young men with their fine cloaks and their secret taste for fish as a sign of the state's decay. The new generation, however, sees the old ways as antiquated and provincial. Why should they, the masters of Greece, live like beggars? One of the great historical debates is about the speed of this decline. Did the Spartan system collapse dramatically after the influx of Athenian wealth, or was it a slow, grinding process that took over a century? The historian Xenophon, writing in this period, lamented the decline, suggesting that the laws of Lycurgus were no longer being followed. Yet other evidence suggests that many of the old institutions, like the Agoge and the Sys Cityon, continued to function, at least in form. It was likely a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow unraveling of the social fabric as the ideals of equality and austerity clashed with the new reality of wealth and empire. You are at a private feast, invited to the home of a wealthy ye. Each of this is not a public mess hall meal. This is something different. You are reclining not on a hard wooden bench, but on a couch with a woven cushion. The wine served is not Laconian, but a smooth, fragrant vintage from the island of Chios. And the food is a revelation. There is no black broth. Instead, there is roasted lamb, seasoned with herbs you can't even name. There is soft wheat bread, not hard barley cake. Their olives marinated in fine oil. You take a bite of the lamb. The flavor is complex, rich, and deeply satisfying. It is, objectively, the most delicious thing you have ever eaten, and it fills you with a profound sense of unease. This food is a betrayal. Each savory bite feels like a nail in the coffin of everything you were taught to believe. You are tasting the end of your world. The Spartan ideal, so long protected, is being eaten away from the inside out, one delicious, corrupting meal at a time. The old ways are dying, but they don't die quietly. They die in a series of small, awkward, and sometimes comical clashes between the past and the present. The tension between the ingrained ideal of austerity and the new reality of wealth plays out not just in the state's politics, but on the dinner plates of its most powerful citizens. One of the best stories to capture this cultural confusion involves a Spartan king named Clemens. Clemens had spent a significant amount of time living in exile in Asia Minor, a region heavily influenced by the lavish culture of Persia. There he had grown accustomed to a certain level of comfort and, more importantly, to a refined and flavorful cuisine. He had developed a taste for things other than boiled pork. When he finally returned to Sparta to reclaim his throne, he brought his new, more sophisticated palate with him. One day, feeling nostalgic for the life he had known abroad, he decided he wanted to host a proper Asiatic or Athenian-style dinner party. He wanted to impress some guests, or perhaps just treat himself. So, he summoned his royal cook. The cook, a man who had been trained in the traditional Spartan way, was a master of the mess hall. He knew how to boil a pig to perfection, how to get the blood to vinegar ratio in the black broth just right, and how to bake a barley cake so hard it could double as a weapon. He was, by Spartan standards, an expert. King Clemens gave his order, "Prepare me a grand feast," in the style of the Athenians. The cook just stared at him, completely baffled. An Athenian feast with multiple courses with sauces, spices, and roasted delicacies. The concept was utterly alien to him. It was like asking a blacksmith to perform brain surgery. He had neither the ingredients nor the knowledge. Where would he get the rare spices? How does one properly roast a fish without turning it to charcoal? What even is a sauce? His entire culinary education had been about one thing: boiling. He was a specialist in boiled food. Roasting, frying, baking with yeast, these were the dark arts of foreigners. According to the story, the cook, in a moment of panic and frustration, simply told the king that it was impossible. He was a Spartan cook, and he cooked Spartan cook. He couldn't just produce an Athenian banquet out of thin air. This small, almost funny incident is incredibly revealing. It shows how deep the cultural conditioning ran. The Spartan disdain for culinary arts wasn't just a philosophical pose, it was a practical reality. They had actively de-skilled themselves in the kitchen for centuries. The knowledge was simply not there. Even if a king wanted to eat well, his staff was fundamentally incapable of providing it. A lesser-known but equally important detail is that the very layout of a Spartan kitchen would have been unsuited for fine dining. It would have had a simple hearth, a few large cauldrons for boiling, and not much else. There would be no complex ovens for baking, no variety of pots and pans for making sauces. The infrastructure for good food was as absent as the skill set. This story of the king and his flustered cook touches on a debate that still engages historians. To what extent did the Spartan elite actually adopt foreign customs? The traditional view, based on writers like Plutarch, paints a picture of a sharp decline, with the rich quickly abandoning the old ways. But other scholars argue for more resistance and continuity. They suggest that even a king like Clemens might have found his attempts at luxury frustrated by a culture that simply wasn't built for it. He could try to host an Athenian-style party, but the result would probably be a clumsy, awkward imitation. You can take the Spartan out of the mess hall, but you can't take the mess hall out of the Spartan. Imagine being a fly on the wall in that royal kitchen. You see the king, used to the pleasures of the wider world, trying to explain the concept of a garnish to a man who thinks flavor is a moral failing. You see the cook, a proud professional in his own right, being asked to do something that goes against every principle he has ever known. The king's desire for a good meal was a symptom of the changing times. Sparta was no longer an isolated, inward-looking state. It was an imperial power, entangled in the complex politics and cultures of the entire Mediterranean. Its leaders were exposed to new ideas, new temptations, and new tastes. But the city they ruled was still, at its heart, Sparta. The old structures, the old habits, and the old limitations remained. The clash between the king's new desires and his cook's old skills is a perfect metaphor for the state of Sparta itself. In its later years, a society caught between a glorious, austere past and a confusing, tempting future. The king probably didn't get his fancy dinner that night. He likely ended up with a slightly more elaborate version of a boiled supper, a frustrating reminder that even if you're the king, some traditions are very hard to break. Your life is drawing to a close. You are an old man now, perhaps in your 70s. You have outlived most of your comrades. You've seen Sparta rise to the pinnacle of power after the Peloponnesian War, and you've watched the slow, steady erosion of the old ways. The city is not the same one you were born into. There is more wealth now, more inequality. The young men seem softer, their discipline less absolute. The black broth is still served in the mess halls, but it feels more like a nostalgic ritual than the core of your existence. You sit in the warmth of the afternoon sun, your back against the stone wall of your home. Your body is worn, scarred from 100 battles and a lifetime of grueling training. Your hands, which once held a spear and shield with unshakable firmness, are now gnarled and frail. You close your eyes and you think back, and what you remember, with a surprising clarity, is the taste of your life. Your first memory of flavor is the faint sweetness of your mother's milk, a fleeting comfort before the blandness began. Then comes the dominant taste of your childhood, the flat, grainy nothingness of barley porridge. You remember the shock of your first fig, a burst of concentrated sugar that felt like a miracle. Then comes the Agoge. The memory of that first bowl of black broth is still vivid. The assault of salt and vinegar, the metallic tang of blood. You can almost feel the instinctive revulsion, the battle of will it took to swallow that first mouthful. For 13 years, that was the taste of your education. You remember the stolen food and how it was always the best. The sharp, glorious flavor of a stolen wheel of cheese, eaten in secret in the dark. the smoky, greasy magnificence of a roasted boar after a successful hunt. These were the flavors of cunning, of courage, of life, flavors of cunning, of courage, of life lived on the edge. They were the exceptions that proved the rule. You recall the watered-down wine of the SYS Sidian, a taste so familiar. It's the taste of camaraderie, of long evenings spent with the men who were your true family. It's the taste of quiet jokes and serious talk, the liquid mortar that held the shield wall together. You think about the bland boiled meat of the festivals, a slight improvement that only highlighted the austerity of your normal diet. You remember the taste of the parched barley meal on campaign, mixed with gritty water in your wooden cup. That was the taste of duty, of the dust of the road, of the moments of quiet dread before a battle. It was a life of culinary deprivation, a life that any Athenian would consider a form of torture. You lived through an age where others were perfecting art, philosophy, and cuisine, while you were perfecting the art of endurance. A strange, final detail about the Spartan decline is that as their military power waned and their unique social structure crumbled, their reputation became their main export. Rich Romans in later centuries became obsessed with a romanticized idea of Sparta. They would travel to the dilapidated city as tourists, eager to see the authentic Spartan rituals. They would pay to watch boys being flogged at the altar of Artemis or Thea, a brutal tradition that had morphed into a bloody, tourist spectacle. One has to wonder if these Roman tourists also paid to try a bowl of authentic black broth, a final, ironic commodification of a dish that was created to reject all worldly value. Historians will forever argue about your civilization. Were you a utopian warrior society, a model of discipline and equality, or were you a brutal, totalitarian state built on slavery and fear? Were you admirable heroes, or monstrous thugs? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the murky middle, as complex and hard to swallow as your famous soup. But for you, sitting here at the end of it all, the grand historical judgment doesn't matter. You have your own verdict. You open your eyes and look out at the rugged peaks of Mount Os, the same mountains that have watched over Sparta for 1,000 years. Was it worth it, this lifetime of flavorless food, of relentless hardship? Was it a worthy trade for the glory of Sparta, for the honor of being a peer, for the security of a state that was, for a time, the master of all Greece? You think of the men you fought beside. You think of the discipline that held you steady in the face of death. You think of the unwavering sense of purpose that defined your every waking moment. You don't have a simple answer. The world has changed, and the old certainties have faded. But as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the valley, you feel a quiet, stubborn sense of pride. You ate as a Spartan. You ate like a Spartan, and you would not have traded it for all the fine banquets in Athens. The taste of your life was not pleasant, but it was yours. And it was the taste of glory. The day fades completely now. The sharp edges of the mountains soften into silhouettes against the skies. The air grows cool, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant pines. Your memories, once so sharp and vivid, begin to blur, their flavors blending together into a single, long, sustained note. The gnawing hunger of the Agoge, the sour tang of the broth, the stolen sweetness of a fig, they all recede, becoming echoes in a vast, quiet space. You are no longer in the sun-drenched courtyard of your home. You are drifting. The hard stone behind your back melts away, replaced by a gentle, supporting current. You feel weightless, suspended in the deep, peaceful twilight of consciousness. The sounds of the world, the distant bleating of a goat, the murmur of voices from a nearby house grow faint, wrapped in cotton. You are floating down the gentle stream of the Eurotas River, the river where you gathered reeds for your first bed, the river you had to swim in to truly understand your world. The water is cool and silent, carrying you effortlessly along. The disciplined, rigid world of Sparta dissolves. The hard edges of the barley cakes, the sharp taste of vinegar, they all soften and flow away. There is no duty here, no hunger, no fear. rhythmic pull of the current, a lullaby in the language of water. Your journey is over. The long, hard day is done. It is time to rest, to let the river carry you into the deep, quiet dark of a well-earned sleep. The end of the article. Good night.